The Galactic Council of Eternal Deliberation had existed for 4 billion years. It was the oldest institution in the known universe. Every intelligent species that had ever achieved space travel knew about it. Every empire, every federation, every collective of minds had sent their representatives to sit in the great chamber on the artificial world called Nexus Prime. The council made decisions that shaped the fate of entire galaxies. But they made those decisions slowly. Very slowly. Ambassador Trellix of the Vornithy Collective floated into the human embassy on Nexus Prime with what his species considered urgent news. His crystalline body hummed with frequencies that indicated mild concern. He had traveled 17 light years to deliver this message personally because the matter required immediate attention. "Human Ambassador Chun," Trellix said, his voice like wind chimes in a storm, "I bring news of great importance. The Galactic Council has received a petition from the Krath Empire. They wish to claim the territory known as Sector 447B. This sector contains your colony world called New Minnesota." Ambassador Sarah Chun looked up from her desk. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been Earth's representative to the Galactic Council for 12 years. In that time, she had learned many things about alien civilizations. The most important thing she had learned was that they all moved incredibly slowly. "When was this petition filed?" she asked. 342 standard years ago, Trellix replied. "The preliminary review period has just concluded. The council will now begin formal deliberations." Sarah nodded. This was normal. The Galactic Council did nothing quickly. Their preliminary reviews lasted centuries. Their formal deliberations could take thousands of years. Their final decisions sometimes came after the civilizations involved had already collapsed and been replaced by new ones. "What is the expected timeline for a decision?" Sarah asked. Trellix consulted his internal databases. "Based on the complexity of the case and the current council workload, we estimate a final ruling in approximately 14,000 years. Perhaps less if the matter is deemed simple." Sarah stared at the alien ambassador. 14,000 years. The Krath Empire wanted to take a human colony, and the response time was 14,000 years. She thought about New Minnesota. 3 million people lived there. They grew crops, raised families, built cities. They had dreams and hopes and fears. And somewhere in the cold depths of space, an empire had filed paperwork to take their home away. "Is there any way to speed up the process?" Sarah asked. Trellix made a sound that indicated confusion. "Speed up? I do not understand." The Galactic Council operates at optimal efficiency. Each case receives the careful consideration it deserves. 14,000 years is actually quite fast for a territorial dispute of this magnitude. Sarah dismissed the ambassador politely and sat alone in her office for a long time. She thought about humanity's position in the galaxy. They were newcomers. They had only achieved faster than light travel 200 years ago. In galactic terms, they were infants. But they were infants with very different ideas about time. She called an emergency meeting with Earth's government. The response came in 6 hours. By galactic standards, this was impossibly fast. Most species took decades to arrange a simple communication between worlds. Humans used quantum entanglement networks that allowed instant messaging across any distance. They had built these networks because waiting bothered them. Waiting was inefficient. Waiting was unacceptable. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Decisions were made. Orders were given. Ships were launched. 2 weeks after Ambassador Trellix delivered his news, the human fleet arrived in Sector 447B. 47 warships took up defensive positions around New Minnesota. Supply lines were established. Ground defenses were upgraded. The Galactic was told to continue their normal lives while the military handled the situation. 3 weeks after that, human diplomats arrived at the Krath Empire's capital world. They presented a simple message. The Krath could withdraw their petition to the Galactic Council. or they could face immediate consequences. There would be no 14,000-year wait. There would be no careful deliberation. There would be action. The Krath Emperor was confused. This was not how things were done. The Galactic Council existed specifically to handle these matters. Wars were expensive and destructive. The Council provided a peaceful alternative. Every civilized species used the Council to resolve disputes. The human diplomats explained that humans were happy to use peaceful alternatives. But those alternatives needed to work on human timescales. A decision that came 14,000 years from now was useless to people who lived for less than 100 years. By the time the Council ruled on New Minnesota, everyone who currently lived there would be dead. Their children would be dead. Their great-great-grandchildren would be dead. The colony might not even exist anymore. The Krath Emperor asked for time to consider the human position. He wanted to consult with his advisors, review historical precedents, and meditate on philosophical implications. The human diplomats gave him 72 hours. News of this ultimatum spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Species that had existed for millions of years suddenly became aware of the strange newcomers called humans. They watched with curiosity and concern as the situation developed. The Krath Emperor made his decision in 68 hours. He withdrew the petition. Sector 447b would remain under human control. The matter was closed. This should have been the end of the story. But it was only the beginning. Other species began to take notice. The Villani Federation had been waiting 300,000 years for the Council to rule on a trade dispute with the Moretti Syndicate. The crystalline mines had submitted a petition about resource rights 2 million years ago and were still waiting for the preliminary review to conclude. The Eternal Collective had cases pending that predated the formation of most current civilizations. They all watched what the humans had done. They all began to ask the same question. Why were they waiting? Within 5 years, the Galactic Council received more withdrawal notices than it had received in its entire 4-billion-year history. Species that had patiently waited for millennia suddenly decided they were done waiting. They started resolving their disputes directly, through negotiation or confrontation. They stopped submitting new petitions. They stopped sending representatives. The Council tried to respond. They called emergency sessions to address the crisis. But their emergency sessions took centuries to organize. By the time they assembled to discuss the problem had grown exponentially worse. More species were leaving. More disputes were being resolved outside the system. The oldest institution in the universe was crumbling. Ambassador Trellix returned to the human embassy 70 years after his first visit. His crystalline form now pulsed with colors that indicated deep distress. Ambassador Chun is no longer with us, the new human representative said. His name was David Park, and he was the 8th human ambassador since Trellix's last visit. She passed away 31 years ago. Is there something I can help you with? Trellix struggled to process this information. Chun had been alive less than a single standard deliberation period. Her entire existence had been a brief flash between council sessions. And yet, in that flash, she had started a chain of events that had brought the galaxy's oldest institution to its knees. The Galactic Council is failing, Trellix said. Species are abandoning the system your people showed them could be abandoned. There have been 17 major wars in the past 50 years. Billions have died. The peace that existed for 4 billion years is gone. David Park listened carefully. He understood the aliens' perspective. The Council had provided stability. It had prevented wars by giving everyone a peaceful option for resolving disputes. Yes, that option took thousands of years to produce results, but the option existed. And as long as it existed, no one felt the need to fight. I understand your concern, David said, but I have a question for you. In those 4 billion years of peace, how many species went extinct while waiting for the Council to resolve disputes about their survival? Trellix did not answer immediately. He accessed his historical databases. The numbers were not good. Countless civilizations had disappeared while their petitions languished in bureaucratic limbo. Entire species had been wiped out while the Council conducted preliminary reviews of their requests for help. The Council saved many lives, Trellix finally said. The wars that are happening now would have happened anyway, eventually. Maybe, David agreed. But at least now those wars can end. A conflict that starts today can be over next year. Under the old system, a conflict that started today might still be under review when the stars themselves burned out. The Galactic Council officially dissolved 300 years after humanity's first contact with alien life. It was replaced by a network of smaller, faster institutions. These new bodies made decisions in decades rather than millennia. They made mistakes sometimes. They were not perfect. But they were responsive. They were relevant. They existed on timescales that meant something to the beings they served. Historians across the galaxy studied how it happened. They traced the collapse back to a single moment. A human ambassador had received news about a territorial dispute. She had responded in hours instead of centuries. She had sent ships instead of filing counter-petitions. She had demanded action instead of accepting eternal patience. The oldest institution in the universe had survived asteroid impacts, supernova, the rise and fall of countless empires, and the heat death of entire galactic clusters. It had weathered every challenge the cosmos could throw at it. But it could not survive contact with a species that refused to wait. Some aliens mourned the loss of the old ways. They remembered the dignity of the Great Chamber, the wisdom of deliberations that lasted longer than most species existed, the profound patience that had guided galactic civilization for 4 billion years. Others celebrated the change. They pointed to the new institutions, the faster resolutions, the sense that problems could actually be solved within a single lifetime. They argued that the old council had been a monument to stagnation, a system that preserved peace by simply refusing to act. The debate continued for generations, but one thing was certain. The galaxy had been changed forever by a species that had only existed for a moment in cosmic terms. Humans had looked at the oldest, most stable institution in existence and asked a simple question. Why does this take so long? The answer, it turned out, was that it did not have to. The council had been slow because slowness was tradition. It had been patient because patience was expected. No one had ever challenged these assumptions because no one had ever thought to challenge them. Until the humans arrived. Sarah Chun never knew the full impact of her decision. She died believing she had simply protected one colony from one threat. She never saw the council's collapse or the transformation of galactic civilization. But her name became famous across 1,000 worlds. She was remembered as the woman who proved that the oldest institution in the universe was not eternal. It had simply been waiting for someone impatient enough to end it.